Have you ever noticed that Nick Blaine has never really been fighting for his own future? Think about it. Every major decision he's made since the very first season has been about saving someone else. First June, then Nicole, then trying to protect Hannah from the shadows. He's never been chasing freedom for himself. He's never been chasing power. He's never even been chasing survival. He's been sacrificing pieces of himself, one choice at a time. And if that's true, then what if Nick's story was never supposed to end with him escaping Gilead? What if it was always leading toward one final sacrifice? Because the more you look at where his story is heading, the more it starts to feel like Nick isn't being set up for a happy ending. He's being set up for redemption. And that redemption may cost him everything. Now, before we dive into this theory, do me one quick favor. Hit that subscribe button. It's completely free. It helps the channel more than you know. And unlike becoming a commander in Gilead, it doesn't require making terrible life choices or pretending everything is fine while the world burns around you. If you enjoy deep breakdowns, hidden details, and theories that leave you questioning everything after the credits roll, you're in exactly the right place. And while you're down there, leave a like as well. Every like, every comment, and every share helps these videos reach more fans of The Handmaid's Tale. I spend a lot of time rewatching episodes, connecting character arcs, and digging into the details that are easy to miss, so your support genuinely means a lot. Now, spoiler warning. This video contains spoilers for The Handmaid's Tale through its final season, along with discussion of where Nick's story appears to be heading and how it connects to Hannah's future. If you're not caught up yet, this is your chance to leave before Gilead ruins your day all over again. Still here? Good, because I don't believe Nick's ending is really about Nick. It's about Hannah. And once you realize that, almost every decision he's made over the last several seasons starts making a lot more sense. One of the biggest questions fans have asked since June escaped Gilead is surprisingly simple. Why didn't Nick leave with her? If he loved June as much as the show constantly tells us he did, why stay behind? Why remain inside one of the most dangerous governments on Earth? Why continue wearing the uniform of a commander when every part of him clearly rejected what Gilead had become? At first glance, it doesn't make sense. Most people in Nick's position would have escaped the first chance they got. June certainly wanted him to. The audience certainly expected him to. But Nick stayed. Not because he loved Gilead, not because he believed in its ideology, not because he wanted power. He stayed because someone had to. That's the difference between Nick and almost everyone else in this story. He's never measured success by whether he survives. He's measured success by whether the people he loves survive. And those are two very different goals. Once June reached Canada, Nick understood something she couldn't fully see from outside Gilead. She had people protecting her. Luke, Moira, American intelligence. Eventually, even Tuello. But Hannah? Hannah had no one. No parent. No ally. No one living inside Gilead is willing to risk everything for her. Except Nick. That's what quietly transforms his entire character arc. He stops being June's escape route. He becomes Hannah's last hope. And that's a far more dangerous role. Because unlike smuggling information, unlike arranging secret meetings, unlike passing messages, saving Hannah would require something much bigger. It would require openly betraying Gilead. Not quietly, not secretly, publicly. That kind of betrayal only ends one way: death. That's why I don't believe Nick's imprisonment is simply another obstacle placed in front of him. I think it's preparation. Throughout The Handmaid's Tale, the writers have always followed the same pattern. Before a character makes the biggest decision of their life, they're stripped of everything protecting them. Serena loses her influence, Lawrence loses his certainty, June loses her fear, and now Nick loses his status. His marriage falls apart. His relationship with Rose collapses. Commander Lawrence no longer trusts him. His loyalty is questioned. His future inside Gilead begins crumbling right before our eyes. That isn't random storytelling. It's the show removing every reason Nick had to keep playing by Gilead's rules. Because once a character has nothing left to lose, they're finally free to make the impossible decision. And that's exactly where Nick is now. He has already sacrificed his career, his reputation, his family, his safety. The only thing he still has left to give is himself. That's why Hannah becomes so important. Not because she's biologically his daughter. She isn't. But because she's the last promise he never managed to keep. From the very beginning, Every conversation between June and Nick eventually returned to Hannah. Every plan, every dream, every impossible hope. It always came back to one little girl trapped inside a country neither of them could truly escape. Even after June crossed the border, Hannah remained the unfinished chapter in both of their lives. And unfinished chapters have a way of demanding endings. The question is, what kind of ending? Because The Handmaid's Tale has never rewarded its heroes with easy victories. Every triumph comes with loss. Every escape demands sacrifice. Every act of love carries a price. Which raises one terrifying possibility. What if Hannah finally gets out, only because Nick never does? And honestly, would there be a more fitting ending for his character than that? The more you examine Nick's journey, the harder it becomes to believe that the writers are preparing him for anything other than a final act of sacrifice. His story has never followed the traditional path of a hero. Heroes usually become stronger, gather allies, and slowly move toward victory. Nick has done the opposite. Every season has taken something away from him. His freedom disappeared long ago. His relationship with June became something he could never fully hold on to. Even the authority that came with becoming a commander wasn't really power. It was another prison, just one with a nicer uniform. Every promotion pushed him deeper into the very system he secretly despised. That's what makes his character so fascinating. While everyone else was trying to escape Gilead physically, Nick has been trapped inside it emotionally from the very beginning. And that's exactly why his conversation with Mark Tuello carries so much more weight than people often realize. On the surface, it sounds like a man accepting reality. Nick admits that June has people outside Gilead who love her, people who can give her a future he never could. But beneath those words is something much more painful. He's already decided where he belongs. Not because Gilead deserves his loyalty, but because Hannah is still there. As long as Hannah remains inside those walls, Nick knows someone has to stay behind. Someone has to watch. Someone has to gather information. Someone has to be willing to risk everything from the inside. In that moment, he quietly stops being June's lover and becomes something else entirely. He becomes the guardian of her greatest hope. That's why I don't believe the show ever intended for Nick to ride off into the sunset with June. As heartbreaking as their relationship has always been, it was never built on the promise of forever. It was built on survival. In the darkest place imaginable, they gave each other something worth holding on to. They reminded each other that kindness could still exist inside cruelty, that love could survive even where humanity seemed to disappear. But relationships born in war rarely get peaceful endings. They become stories about sacrifice, about impossible choices, about giving up the future you wanted so someone else has a chance to have one. That has been the emotional language of The Handmaid's Tale from the very beginning, and Nick has spoken that language better than almost anyone. Then there's his confrontation with Commander Lawrence, and I don't think that moment happened simply to create drama. It feels like the point where every mask Nick has been wearing finally slips. For years, he managed to balance two identities: the respected commander who appeared loyal to Gilead, and the man secretly helping June whenever he could. That balancing act couldn't last forever. Every lie eventually reaches a point where it collapses under its own weight, and when Nick lashes out, it isn't just anger, it's exhaustion. He's tired of pretending, tired of watching innocent people suffer while convincing himself he can make a difference later, tired of waiting for the perfect moment that never seems to arrive. Sometimes one impulsive decision reveals what a character has truly wanted all along, and Nick's decision tells us he's no longer interested in surviving if survival means becoming another obedient servant of Gilead. That changes everything heading into the final chapter of his story. Because once his cover is compromised, he loses the one advantage that kept him alive. The commanders become suspicious. His influence begins disappearing. Even the carefully constructed life he built inside Gilead starts falling apart. Most stories would treat this as the beginning of a character's downfall. I see it differently. I think it's the beginning of his freedom. Strange as that sounds, losing everything Gilead gave him also frees him from protecting it. There are no more promotions waiting, no higher office to achieve, no reputation left to preserve. The chains that kept him obedient have already started breaking. And when someone no longer has anything left to protect except the people they love, they're capable of doing extraordinary things. Now imagine the situation from Nick's perspective if Hannah finally becomes the target of another operation. He knows exactly how Gilead works. He knows how quickly the regime punishes children to send messages to parents. He's watched innocent people become political tools over and over again. If Hannah becomes leverage against June one last time, Nick won't see a military operation. He'll see the promise he failed to keep. Every conversation with June about saving Hannah would come rushing back. Every moment where he had to tell her there was nothing he could do would suddenly become unbearable. That's why this theory feels so believable. Nick doesn't need to save Hannah because she's his responsibility on paper. He needs to save her because, in his own heart, she became his responsibility a long time ago. And if that mission ever happens, I don't expect it to be clean or heroic in the traditional sense. This world doesn't reward perfect plans. It rewards courage in impossible situations. I can already imagine Nick using every connection he's built over the years, every piece of intelligence he's gathered, and every ounce of trust he's earned as a commander, not to strengthen Gilead, but to tear a hole through it just wide enough for Hannah to escape. The irony would be devastating. Everything Gilead gave Nick, his rank, his authority, his access, would become the very tools he uses to betray it. That's the kind of poetic storytelling this series has always loved. And here's where the tragedy reaches its highest point. Even if Nick succeeds, he probably already knows he isn't crossing that border with Hannah. Gilead has always made one thing painfully clear. People who betray the regime from the inside rarely live long enough to enjoy their freedom. Nick understands that better than anyone. He has spent years watching what happens to traitors. He knows the cost before he ever makes the decision, which means if he chooses to save Hannah anyway, it won't be because he believes he'll survive. It'll be because he finally decides that Hannah's future is worth more than his own. That's the ending that would complete his story, not because it's shocking, but because it's earned. Nick has spent 6 seasons giving away pieces of himself. His freedom, his peace, his future. The only thing left to give is his life. And if his final act allows June to embrace Hannah again, then every impossible choice he made along the way suddenly gains a heartbreaking new meaning. He wasn't surviving for himself, he was surviving long enough to make that reunion possible.